What's up, everybody? Welcome to another exciting episode of Sneaky Geek. I know I say exciting every time, but this time
so exciting.
I'm super excited. I'm super excited. Two weeks ago, maybe? Was it? I don't know.
So. What's time?
I think so. Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. Was it 2 weeks ago, Marcus?
Yeah, about that.
About 2 weeks ago, I saw an ad on Instagram with this handsome fella talking directly into the camera about the intersection of black music and culture and anime, as well as other various ways that they intersected, and that he was going to do a whole concert for it, and it was going to be 30 minutes from the house. And I said, I'm absolutely going to that. Like, change my plans. I don't care what's happening on Friday. I'm going. And then I texted it to everybody, and everybody was like, I'm going out of town. I'm doing stuff. I have other things going on. And I was like, well, you're wrong, and you should feel bad. And then I went, and it was awesome. And there was this whole concert, and it blew my mind. And afterwards, I went up and I talked to the conductor, who also did all the arrangements. And his name is Dr. Marcus Norris. And I said, come be on our podcast. And I chased him down and I twisted his arm, and he said, fine, I'll do it if I have to. And now he's here. So say hello, Marcus.
Hey, that's about accurate, man. You left out the part about, like, holding my hamster for ransom until I do the show. But other than that seems pretty accurate.
I was trying to keep it PG, man. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the concert and how you came up with that idea first, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, so like many of us, I'm just a lifelong anime fan. And I had always kind of wondered why so many Black Americans love anime. I mean, it's amazing, and just so many people love anime, but it always felt like really concentrated. There's like this group on the internet, call themselves Blurds, Black Nerds, and there's like a Blurred Con, and there's like all of these things. And I always like wondered kind of what the genesis of that was, because there's not like a lot of Black representation in anime or anything like that. And then on the flip side, I always also wondered, how come when you watch anime, so many of the classic anime scores are just Black American music, like jazz, or lately so much of it has been like hip hop, and and there aren't a lot of there aren't even a lot of Black folks in Japan or anything like this. So I just started with kind of these questions of like, why is this happening? And I just spent like months and going down all these rabbit holes and reading articles and watching videos and interviews and all these things. And when I was done, I thought, like, man, I could make a really, really boring video about this, or I can just do like this big concert party and just kind of make it a fun thing where we just celebrate this cultural exchange.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it was really cool because you managed to also intersect it at the end of AAPI month over at the Segerstrom Center. Yeah,
that was their idea. I wish I could take credit, but I thought that was a really cool way to do it, where May is AAPI Heritage Month and June is Black Music Month. And so we did the concert on May 31st.
Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah, it was super, super cool. Before we get into all of the things that you did discover in your research, etc., why don't you tell us about your kind of journey into, falling in love with anime and all of that? Like, what's your first anime?
I think my first anime would have to be Dragon Ball Z.
Nice.
Yeah, classic. Yep.
A classic, man. I always joke like Goku basically raised me.
Probably more than Gohan.
Didn't raise his own kids. Right. I was going to say, didn't raise his own kids, but,
but he
raised all of us. Exactly. He was busy. But, I remember where I was, and I remember that, like, him going Super Saiyan on Namek for the first time. It's like a defining moment of my life.
So epic. Yeah.
And I try to explain like those type of moments to like young fans now, or like new anime fans now, who come up in like the era of just like, oh, I find a new anime and I binge it in a weekend or something. It's we had to like wait, like, and we had like by the time we saw like Super Saiyan happen, we had been hearing whispers about it for like literal months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Like I feel you lose some of the epicness if it's just like, you know, I hear somebody mention Super Saiyan this morning and then like, you know, 2 episodes later, same day it's happening. It's like, no, this was like, is it real? Is it not real?
Yeah, right.
What does it mean, the legendary Super Saiyan? What will happen? Like, how will we even know?
Exactly. So that's an element.
Oh, they're only on Namek for, it's got 5 more minutes? Oh, we have plenty. Yeah, it should be coming up real quick. Months later.
Literally.
Yeah, we're actually watching Dragon Ball Super last night, and we're joking about that because we're on. I don't know if you're up to date on it or if you've watched it. But we're on one of the last story arcs, and it's supposed to take place. The tournament takes place over 48 minutes, but it's literally like 2.5, 3 seasons worth of discs. It's like, oh, classic. I'm like, and I've seen it before, but Bryce and Nicole haven't seen it, so I'm like, it's fine. The pacing's good, and yeah, it kind of plays into that trope a little bit, but like, it's way better pacing than the Namek Saga.
Oh my gosh, the wait for Frieza was infuriating. When I watched it as a kid, because you're only getting these in like 15-minute bites that are being split between pizza and like Kool-Aid commercials.
Yeah,
like it's not so hard, I feel like, you know, I mean, obviously it's months and months and months, but trying to watch it all at once, because we watched the entirety of DBZ during the pandemic,
yeah,
and trying to watch it all at once is just like, just do it already.
Yeah.
Just do something. Stop yelling and just do something.
Right. Do you feel like our patience has changed over time? Like,
oh yeah,
we've changed, right? Not that the show hasn't changed.
Oh, exactly.
I feel like after the Namek Saga, they sped up a little bit. The Cell Saga was definitely my first, like, that was where I kind of jumped in. The androids and the Cell, and like androids and Trunks and Cell, those all happened relatively quickly compared to Frieza specifically. Yeah. But the show itself does still take a lot of its time with a lot of these fights. I mean, yeah, you fought Beerus for 10 episodes or something like that, so it still goes. But I don't think anything takes as long as the Namek Saga did.
No, not at all.
Yeah, they really milked it, and I think I know nostalgia plays a factor, but I kind of like it. I haven't sat and watched it in like a few years really, but I don't know, when, like, you know, some years back, I would join in on the jokes with everybody about it, but there's something charming about it for me. There's something that makes you appreciate it.
Oh, totally.
I got younger siblings, and I was really happy when Dragon Ball Z Kai came out, because I'm like, this is going to do something. Like, this new generation is going to fall in love with this thing I fell in love with. But like I said, I just felt like you don't recognize the weight of it if you didn't have to like get that delayed gratification. Like, oh, totally. I'm talking, this is Frieza. And they're like, yeah, sure, boomer.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're like, no, you guys don't understand. Like, come on, like, just hear me out.
Exactly. I'm like, you don't understand what you're experiencing right now. This is the legendary Super Saiyan. And it's like, yeah, sure, yeah, that's what you tell me.
And they're like, yeah, we've seen him a whole bunch of times before in commercials and stuff, right? And you're like, no, this is, no.
And I don't know, I just feel like that delayed gratification just made it feel so much more epic when it finally did happen. I don't know. That's my old man stance.
And just how they took their time with the transformation itself, and then like with Krillin, and it was so emotional. And it was so huge, and yeah,
losing Krillin was rough, because I don't know. When we watched it too, Brian had just watched Kai, and so he started pointing out like, oh, this isn't in Kai. Yeah. They cut this out. Yeah. Oh, this isn't in Kai. They cut that out. And after a while, I would just be like, why would they do that? Like, I don't think I want to watch Kai if it's going to be this streamlined.
Quick. Yeah.
Like you miss it exactly that.
Yeah, and we talked about that too. There's a few things that they kept that they put in the show that wasn't in the manga. And just for filler, because it was kind of getting ahead of itself, as anime does sometimes. Mm-hmm. And but some of the filler was actually really good and really cool character development stuff.
Yeah, that's how I feel about a lot of those movies too. Like, I watched Tree of Might for the first time the other day, and I was like, this fills up so much information that they sort of just glossed over. Like, why isn't this canon? You know, but because it wasn't, along with the manga or what have you. Back before we go, just before this becomes just an episode about how much we love Dragon Ball Z,
which we actually need to
do. We've said Dr. Marcus Norris. What are you a doctor in?
So I got my PhD in music composition from UCLA.
Oh, right on.
Nice. So with that, I heard you talking a little bit about some of the pieces and making sure that they had absurd names and things like that, so that you could hear crusty old white men say them and over a microphone, or have them, have Mary Thickness on PBS. Like, how did you go from just music composition to starting this whole symphony that you have with South Side Symphony and getting that all together in the first place?
Yeah. So if you look backwards, it looks like I had this like genius plan, and I came up with it and I executed it in a straight line, but that's just not how it happened. And that's just not how anything happens, like going forward. Growing up, I didn't play instruments or like have anything to do with like orchestral music. I was like a music producer, like a beat maker. Okay. And I had got a 2-year scholarship to a community college that they were giving out to low-income students at the time. And I hopped on like whatever version of a search engine. I think it probably like Ask Jeeves or something existed at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, where's a community college in the state that has something to do with like recording and stuff like that? And so I found one, Schoolcraft College outside Detroit. And so I'm like, all right, that's where I'm going. But while I was there, as part of my like recording degree I was doing to be a better producer, they made me take like some music history classes and like some basic materials and music theory and stuff. And I just got bit by the bug. I loved it, and I just took as much as I could. Fast forward, I did more school. It helped me to get places. I went to UCLA because it got me to LA. And when I was out here, I had this, I never left the idea of like fusing these new tools I was learning as far as like orchestration and orchestral composing with like the R&B and rap and soul and anime music that I grew up on. And I looked around. It was a pragmatic thing. I looked around and I looked at the orchestras and I was like, okay, how many of these orchestras are playing pieces of music even by people alive, let alone people that are alive that look like
question.
Me?
Yeah.
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
Look at the stats, and I was like, so being realistic, I'm like, one, they're barely playing people who are alive. Those that are alive, they don't look like me. And they definitely aren't making this like fusion weird stuff I want to make. So I recognized, I'm like, nobody's going to give me an opportunity to do this. I have to make my own opportunity. And I was like, and I bet it could be really fun, and I could bet it'd be really cool, and people would really enjoy it. I bet there are like-minded people out there if I can just be loud enough that they can find me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's often how things go.
It is. I think that's kind of the wave now. It's like you got to just, do your thing, make your art, and then just kind of be loud enough so that like-minded people can find you.
Yeah. It sounds like that's kind of how like that whole concert from a couple weeks ago happened.
Exactly. And like Bryce said, it's like, saw me talking about it. And that's kind of why I've been talking about things more lately. It's like, just so that I'm like, I know someone else is curious about these things the way I'm curious about. And I bet they'd be excited for the opportunity to come and talk about it.
Right.
Nerd out, I should say.
Yeah. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
No, you see a gap and you were like, I can fill this gap. I am the guy who should fill this gap. You did it.
That's exactly how it goes.
Very, very cool. So your concert was about the intersection of cultures, right? And the very first thought I had when I saw your video that even suggested this thing was Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah.
And Cowboy Bebop for me was like, I was in high school. I was writing my own comic at the time, and I was like obsessing over all these little details. And I got a lot of, I definitely was a kid who heard, you have too much time on your hands as like, as a kid a lot, which always confused me because I felt like I never had enough time to do anything.
Yeah. What ADHD?
What ADHD? What's that? What is that about? So I was like really like deep in trying to make sure that the world building was clear, but also I understood how the world was being built, etc. And then I found this article about Cowboy Bebop, and Cowboy Bebop at the time, I mean, to this day, is still my favorite anime of all time. And I started reading about how the director kind of was treating each fight like a kabuki theater fight and setting it to music, which is why there is like a different, most of the time, jazz piece happening throughout each like action sequence, and how each one of them is set to and animated to music, etc. And that for me was really reassuring, because I was like, okay, cool, I'm not the only one who's doing like weird things and like trying to do like homages without being super obvious about it, etc. Because I mean, obviously there's so many other ways you could do an homage to kabuki theater that isn't just, you know, coordinate all of your fights to a dance track.
Yeah.
But when I saw that you were going to be talking about this, like, and then I saw that Kids on the Slope was going to be playing, and Kids on the Slope is beautiful, as well as, you know, Samurai Champloo and all of these other, you know, which Samurai Champloo kind of same thing, but with hip hop.
Yeah.
There was all of this that immediately came to mind. But when you were first putting this together, like, I mean, you opened with Tank, right? You did open with Tank. I'm remembering that correctly.
Yep.
Right? That's not just where my memory started, because that was what was most important to me. Okay. So you open with Tank, which obviously like sets the tone. Like, okay, we know what we're doing here. We're gonna have that poor alto sax player hit those notes. But with all of this, what were some of your like absolutely have to mentions, and what were the things that you were like, oh, I'd like to talk about that, but our concert doesn't have time, that kind of thing?
No, that's a great question. Honestly, my first, like when I first did my just preliminary list for the concert, it was probably like 3 hours long. I'm like, we could never do this.
Yeah.
You can. Okay, do it.
I know it. I'm like, man, how do we make this happen?
Swapping out those poor musicians.
Right.
Tap
it's
out.
Outside. I'm like, man. So I tried to curate it. I knew early on that I didn't want it to just be a play all my favorite anime music concerts, which would be a really, really cool concert. You know what I mean? Which would be an amazing concert. But I didn't think that that's what this one should be. I know I wanted to curate it around the cultural exchange, and I wanted to do it in a way that allowed, like, I was trying to maximize for the discussions to happen.
Oh, cool.
Like, I wanted to afterwards be standing talking for another like hour with people who are like-minded. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. So were there certain themes and topics you wanted to go into in between the pieces to explain why you did them or why you picked them?
Yeah, I definitely like curated it almost like when I pitched this concert to the Segerstrom Center, I kind of said it would be like hybrid concert, lecture, anime screening, block party. So I definitely had like
you nailed it. Yeah, you absolutely nailed it.
That's what Bryce
understood the assignment.
Yeah, that's what Bryce basically explained what it was to me, the next day or that night when we all got back from different things. Because I was wanting to go, but I was one of the people that already had plans that night. And I'm like, I would totally go. If I get out early, I'll meet you over there. But I didn't get out early. But yeah, I got home and he explained it all. I was like, holy crap, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, no, I think next time we do it, we need to make like a weekend out of it. Like, you know how they do different types of like theater performances or something,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. One night too. You can do the 90s. You can do.
It would be so fun, and that would allow me to get all the music off. So yeah, I knew I wanted to do. You have to do Tank, right? Like you have to do
right.
Tank. It's just objectively some of the best music in television ever, and I wanted to talk about. I love to talk about the music in Cowboy Bebop. One, because it's just objectively amazing, but like what Yoko Kanno has done, and it's like it's a really good one. She's a great example to point to because like jazz often has a lot of like misogyny in it, and also like sometimes the anime community can, but everybody loves Cowboy Bebop, and I can be like, oh, you love that music, right? And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And like, and then you can just like slam dunk on them and just let them know, like, yeah, this was composed by a woman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I knew I had to do this, and it, like I said, and it's just objectively some of the best music in television ever. It's iconic, it's identifiable, and it's also just, I talked about this in the concert, but it's also just really innovative in the way it was used in ways you wouldn't expect. And I knew I wanted to do that. Let's see. I knew I wanted to talk about, and I did end up, I wanted to do some of like the funk-based music and kind of let people know and like kind of make a joke about how you'll watch some of your favorite characters die, and then right afterwards there's just like, you'll see them like just dancing in the end credits to some really upbeat, sunshiny, happy thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
I have no idea why that happens, but it does.
Right. Yeah, we definitely saw a lot of that going through Dragon Ball Z,
specifically the commercial bumper.
Yeah.
Bum, 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 bum. Like right after someone has died, or like you've just discovered the stakes.
Something heavy and like almost a downer, and you're like, oh no, and then this goofy ass music.
We do that sometimes when we're watching other shows sometimes too, like something serious will be happening and like it'll suddenly be like really, really like dead serious, and somebody will go ba 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 ba, just to lighten.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Bryce and I connected on after the concert was like, I kept explaining all this in a really like anti-gatekeeping way, because I knew the crowd would be mixed on experience of anime, where it's like, you know, you have people who are just super into it. They know more than I will ever know about anime. Mm-hmm. But then you also have people who are like, they don't know anything about it yet, but they're curious. And so I kind of wanted to, when I was curating the program and how I would talk about it, I wanted to make sure to like include them on the ride and include them on the joke with us.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to talk about funk. So some things, like, because we were including, like, it was about the cultural exchange between East Asian cultures as a whole and not just Japan. I knew I wanted to talk about like J-pop, K-pop. I would have loved to do like some city pop.
Oh yeah.
I really wanted to do some like Cassiopeia as well, like that like fusion funk jazz stuff.
What is city pop?
To the uninitiated, and I've always described city pop as the type of, like, this isn't a very great description, but it's definitely the type of music that would go over the credits of an episode of City Hunter. But like the actual description of what city pop sounds like, I feel like I'm not qualified to describe that the way that maybe Marcus could.
Yeah, it is a tough one though. It's definitely like kind of like 80s ish. Like you hear it, you're gonna think like late 80s anime. My it's not a good advice, but I would just type city pop into YouTube, and it all sounds like that.
And just
the first thing that comes up, I'm sure all of it sounds like that, but it's great.
Yeah.
It's like if synthwave had a baby with like Flock of Seagulls. But then they had some like borderline operatic singer doing really long notes over all of it.
Yes.
And the subject matter is kind of sad.
But just kind of sad, like you said, like just kind of dipping your toe in sad.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay, and then Cassiopeia.
It's like this super jazzy funk. It's really like musically intricate. It's so cool.
I could dig that.
Yeah. I highly recommend all of that. They got like some really cool records. I really wanted to do that. Like the first version of this was just basically all jazz fusion.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, we have to. I really wanted to do a bit on like K-pop, and I'm not like the biggest or like most educated on K-pop, or I spend my most time with it, but I've heard a bunch and I researched, spent time with it, and it's just really cool because like a lot of it is really just like early 2000s R&B right now. For whatever reason, it just, the sounds are almost exactly. But one thing I wanted to talk about that I didn't get to go to K-pop. I just had to keep the program a little tighter than that. And one thing I wanted to talk about was that like people could be tempted to ask like, how is this not like appropriation or something like that?
Right.
And what's so like amazing about what like a lot of K-pop artists have done, or like some of these other artists that I've been talking about, is like they go directly to those Black American artists and producers and work with them and develop that culture exchange. You know, cool. Teddy Riley has been working in Korea, I think since like 2008 when I was looking up. Teddy Riley is like an old iconic R&B producer who's responsible for like a lot of the New Jack Swing style in the late 80s and early 90s. Yeah. So I really wanted to talk about that, and I didn't have enough time to go there, and I needed to keep it a little more focused.
Well, it's cool that you have all these ideas for what you want to do and what you want to play in the show. So, you know, plenty of chances, hopefully next time.
I'm hoping so. Yeah, I got the show video recorded. I hired videographers to kind of like use all that to kind of package it into something so I can like show people what it is. Because it is such this specific thing, and I feel like it's easier to just like, just watch this.
Right. No, totally.
Right.
Oh, a fun one that we did. The thing I talked about this during the show, but the thing I really struggled with was like, how do you end this concert? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you end it all? And I wrestled with it, but I ended up doing trying to go back to like, okay, what were some of the introduction to anime for a lot of us? And we ended up with like having this jazz singer, my friend Darren Dean, come out and do the Pokemon theme song.
Yeah, I saw a couple of video clips of that. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Because that was technically my first anime too.
It was so many of ours. Like I didn't even know at the time that it was anime. Like I didn't know it was. I'm like, it's just Pokemon. What are you talking about?
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There wasn't even. I don't think there was even like anybody using that word. I feel like when I first was introduced to Pokemon, people were still saying Japanimation.
Yeah, or just cartoon.
Wow.
Still. Yeah. It was, you know, and like I knew it was from Japan because it was from Nintendo, but like same thing with like Mega Man and even Sailor Moon and Card Captors, which were all on in the mornings, you know, but they were on, you know, right there next to Jumanji and Mummies Alive. So like,
exactly.
No, that's so awesome though.
Yeah. And the crowd went absolutely insane when Pokemon started.
I knew they would.
Oh yeah.
I knew they would. That's how I pitched it to the singer. I just sent her, like, I just went on YouTube and just found like a couple of videos of just like hundreds of people like in crowd singing the song, and that's how I pitched it to her. I'm like, they're gonna love you for this. We should do this.
Genius.
I love that she filled that space between the vocals by just yelling out random Pokemon. She's just like, we're just out there. She's just like, Bulbasaur.
Hell yeah.
People were just like, yeah, we love Bulbasaur.
Love him.
It's crazy too. It's interesting. Like what people latch onto. So like when you started with Tank, like I lost my mind. But I've never seen Jujutsu Kaisen. But as soon as you didn't even finish, you said lost in, and before you could even say Paradise, there were these 3 people up in the center that just were losing it. And you were like, okay, cool, we're in the right place. Okay, good.
No, and it's crazy, and like that's one of the things I love about music, and like because I didn't get to talk about this, but think about Pokemon. How did they think? Like you're a team of execs. And you're thinking like, how am I going to teach these children that are hyped up on sugar in the 90s and early 2000s? So much. Like, how am I going to teach them?
40 and sugar. That's all we were eating.
Yeah.
All that was 100% of our diet. Yeah. They had to bribe us with, if y'all remember, they had to bribe us with like Pizza Hut pizzas in order to get us to read.
Yeah. Pizza Hut pizza parties, man.
like,
and they teamed up with like Ninja Turtles and X-Men.
Like we were like,
I'm in. I'll read more books. Yeah,
I'll read more.
Yeah, bro, whatever you need.
So we're hopped up on sugar.
And they're like, how you're an exec and for TV, and you're like, how do I teach these kids the names of these Pokemon? You know what? We need a rap. Put a beat.
Right?
And that's the power of music, man. It's like I thought about that and I wanted to talk about it. It's like when they wanted you to know 150 Pokemon, they're like, it's got to be a rap. That's the only way we could do it. It's got to be a rap.
Gotta catch them all.
That's a thing, bro. I swear to, like, I would have loved to do that, man. Next one.
Next time. Yeah.
Get the full video up.
Yes.
See, you can make it a big old event, do a couple of songs, and then do like a Pokemon Go event.
We need to do karaoke so like people can sing with us.
That's a good idea too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that whole part of the concert really just drove home that like we were amongst our people for sure. And it was interesting too, where you'd see some families come in and like from the parents all the way down to the kids, like everyone was like, I'm here to represent my anime.
Yeah.
And then you'd see other families come in and you'd see the kid going super hard and the parents would be like, where are we? But even they were like dancing along and really enjoying themselves. And I think that it kind of showed them just how much of this is kind of in the greater American cultural zeitgeist at this point, how it's like really kind of unavoidable.
Yeah. But also just how really good a lot of that music is.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the music is so fantastic. And like when you were talking earlier about the appropriation situation with the lack of appropriation, rather, situation with K-pop, like that's a big part of like Yoko Kanno as well. Like Yoko Kanno did not start off as a jazz musician, but had fallen in love with like East Coast bebop and jazz, which in my opinion is the better of the two jazzes, versus West Coast, which I always feel is a little too slow. But that's just one man's opinion. I don't know. You might have a better understanding and education regarding that, but for me, East Coast is where the real jazz should be coming from. But she fell in love with it, but she was listening to these things, going to these concerts, and like actually engrossing herself in that music and not just being like, hey, I saw this thing, which I think is probably why, like, it's that same kind of thing with Kids on the Slope when the guy's like, I just don't understand why it doesn't sound right. Like I'm doing everything right. And it's like, cause you're not feeling it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't separate the art from the artists. You know, I think is a mistake that people make sometimes, like trying to separate, you know, or the art from the environments that make it. You know, you just can't separate the people from the art. And I think all the greats know that, and it shows in their work.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so much of the music is informed by the musicians themselves and the writer, and like just the situation that they're in while they're even recording.
Yeah. And I talked about that at the concert too. That was kind of like one of my main ideas. I said I have two main theses. The first is that we are like wholeheartedly and flat-footedly celebrating our East Asian brothers and sisters and the contributions that they've made to this thing that we call Black music. And second, and also we're not going to forget to also get it from the source as well. And so I'm like, you know, if you love the K-pop and like those boy bands and because what's not to love, it's just good music. It's just good music. It's well, don't forget to also check out Bobby Brown.
Oh yeah, right.
Or the joke I said, I was like, if you love Japanese jazz, you know what you might also like? Jazz.
Yeah. And that's kind of the fun part about just finding like your favorite band, your favorite musician, whoever, like what did they listen to? Where did they get their inspiration from? And then like listen to that, and you can definitely hear influences and stuff, and you know that might influence you as well.
Exactly. And then for like these people that we're talking about, and like Bryce is connecting the dots for, is like if they're connected to these communities, they can serve as great entry points. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know, you go on that jazz rabbit hole, and it's like, well, what else? Yeah. You know, like you just said, who influenced this? Where is this coming from? And you could be introduced, especially now where it's like, versus when we were coming up and you had to like, you'd have to buy another CD or something. It's like, we have access to all music ever at all times. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or, you know, you Google like who influenced who, and boom, you have like 5,000 results that you can.
I mean, and people are putting together whole playlists too.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, here's everybody that this person, you know, has referenced as their. I mean, and the first major social media that took off was MySpace, and everyone listed their, you know, who they were listening to and had a little player on their page. But musicians would often also list their influences on their MySpace pages.
Right.
So like from the mid 2000s, we've been looking at, I feel like we've been kind of thinking about musicians. I mean, us more than other people for sure, but I feel like a lot of culture has kind of taken this idea of like, okay, how did you get here? You know, in this kind of exploration of your roots. Oh, it's this meets this has become a kind of catch-all way to describe music. Yeah. And I don't know, I think that's really cool because it does speak to the history that's behind it, rather than just being like, oh, it's just this. It is what it is. And it's like, well, but no.
That's not how things work.
They clearly take their influence from, you know, this, that, and the other.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And it was something that, like, as a musician, I always thought nobody would really care about that. And I do get asked that, you know, asked about influences in these things. And I'm like, oh, it's so fun to talk about. And you just, I don't know. I didn't think anybody would care about it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and especially if you're an instrument player. Like I play drums and a little bit of bass and guitar, and I like looking up, you know, like current favorite drummers or bassists or whoever, like Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and he plays guitar too. But like all his influences are like the Beatles and Zeppelin, and then random funk bands, but then like random hardcore bands and all this other stuff. So it's kind of cool going down, like that rabbit hole and seeing, cool, how did he get his specific sound? And then how did those musicians get their sound? And I feel like a lot of musicians are more into that than just kind of a general music listener. But I also could be wrong.
I feel like you can only be a music listener and appreciate it for so long before you go, I got to pick one of these things up.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Or depending on the person. Because I know some people that are like, I ain't touching nothing because I know I have no talent, which is a whole nother thing. But yeah.
Listen, we all played flutophone for at least like 3 months in the second grade, so...
I did not.
Oh, really? You guys didn't have to do flutophone?
No. So, funny story, it was 4th grade for us. 4th grade? Yeah, 4th grade. In 4th grade, I moved up to Washington State and was up there for a year.
And Washington has a very anti-flutophone stance. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's awful.
That's well known.
It's well known. Because, their curriculum's different, obviously, so... and then we were only there for a year, so after that I moved back down. But
Were they at least giving you pizza to read?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. I'm glad they got some of their
priorities. Okay, they're not savages.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just interesting hearing, like, coming back, be like, oh, I missed obviously the California mission building and stuff, but that's only going to be in California, because why would Washington care about the California mission stuff?
I can tell you with absolute certainty that what you missed in that lesson was missing plenty of other things too.
Oh, so. I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But back on the subject of just, you know, you listen to these guys, you listen to where their influences come from. And I don't feel like we get enough from the musicians themselves. And I mean, it's probably in interviews that just haven't been translated as to who influences who. But I feel like if you know music well enough, you can hear and go, oh, they're clearly going through their Thelonious Monk phase. They're clearly going through their Coltrane phase. Yeah. They've clearly discovered MF Doom, you know, that kind of thing. But going the opposite direction, speaking of Doom, you threw in like a hint of Wu-Tang in one of your first tracks, and the influence of kung fu films, kaiju films, and anime itself on the rap and hip hop scene. Can you speak to that at all? I assume that also came up in your research.
Yeah. I wanted to make a video talking about like just all of the anime references that have happened in rap and hip hop. I know I just heard like one like yesterday, and it's like, I think it was like Meg Thee Stallion was like, had a bar about anime, and she's done a few, like she's like a big anime fan. I think she just hosted like the anime awards in like Tokyo a few months ago or something. Like yeah, or like at least spoke at it or something, like and it's like I know anime is so like mainstream now, but like as a kid, you know what I mean? Like I could never imagine that happening and that being like this mainstream thing like that. And there are so many. I think I was gonna list like the top 10 or 15 times anime was referenced in rap because it just happened so many times, and I found so many artists, and that's just like the overt references. Like there are other things where it's like music videos being influenced by like anime, like, you know, with some of those like Kanye stuff from like 15, 20 years ago, or there's just so many, the exchange is just so high. There's so many rappers and hip hop culture that is like been influenced by it at this time. And I just think that's fascinating. And I had to choose like which, you know, again, trying to make this a streamlined thing that fits within one concert. I'm like, all right, I get to pick one hip hop group or song to kind of represent that part of the exchange. And I was like, you got to go with Wu-Tang. And I know it's not like, you know what I mean? I was like, you just have to. And that was a fun one to do.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. No, because growing up listening to them a little bit, like that was the fun part too, is seeing you and your friends are kind of into these like nerdy things kind of on the down low or just super niche kind of things. And then like you'll listen to music like Wu-Tang and then like they'll just mention something, and like if you're not totally paying attention you might just kind of like, you know, it's sort of a blink and you miss it kind of thing. But it's just also just like, what did he just say? Did you just bring up like Goku or, you know?
Yeah. Or, I mean,
or Gundam, or, you know,
like King Ghidorah was,
kaiju stuff.
But I mean, that's literally the name of this podcast is Sneaky Geek, because you, especially when we were kids, you know, being super open about this was the sort of thing that was going to get you, you know, chastised and made fun of. And you have to kind of keep it on the DL, and then suddenly you're hearing this fantastic music coming out, and it's just like, oh, you know, little hint of Dragon Ball, little hint of kaiju, you know, things like that.
Yeah, I know, like even Eminem like drops Marvel references all the time. This was before MCU.
Yeah,
like, he read comics growing up, so it's like, oh, that's rad.
I always think of that stuff as like I would say like, if you know, you know, and it's like the people who know are gonna love this. You know what I mean? and I love stuff like that.
Yeah. But there was a lot of that interplay going back and forth. I think, I mean, MF Doom is so much like so obvious about it. And I think Wu-Tang calls themselves Wu-Tang. Like that's, you can kind of figure that out pretty quickly. But some of the other ones, like Thundercat is a huge Pokemon nerd. Yeah. Like he had to have somebody with him while he was in Japan to like stop him from buying like everything he could in the Pokemon store. Yeah. And he talks about that in this podcast I was listening to a couple of years ago. But like, you know, Dragon Ball Durag, like that's exactly. such a that's such a perfect example for me of like this blend of like anime and R&B, hip hop, like that sound, you know, black music. Yeah. So it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
So yeah, we need 5 days of concerts in order to fit it all.
Yeah, okay, I'm in. Yeah.
Right.
Do you have anything else regarding this whole intersection that you feel like is like, if you were to try to explain this to somebody in less than an entire concert, and you instead were to just give them homework, what would you have them go watch, have them go listen to, that kind of thing?
I think I would have them do what we all talked about a bit ago. It's like start with some anime music that you love, and then kind of go down the YouTube wormhole of like, what does this connect to? Where are these sounds from? And you know, and how did that connection happen? You know? Yeah. Like I think it's best if it's guided by the music that interests you. You know, you'll be most excited about just making those discoveries. I think there's like excitement in those discoveries, and that's why I tried to like walk people through all the connections. And even in the video you saw, it's like I didn't just say, hey, there's a concert, this and this. And a lot of people would have still been excited about it, but it was just like, it was about like, I walked them through the discovery that I had. And I think that always feels the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of listening to what your heart's feeling at the time and like what kind of vibe you're feeling and just kind of like going down that rabbit hole.
Exactly. And then those connections happening for you.
Yeah, kind of turning the anime itself into sort of an overture for your next bit of listening that you're going to be going toward.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I know that I've always, like, I played saxophone when I was a kid growing up. Like, that was the instrument I chose when I was in band, and I played it for years. And I still pick it up every once in a while, but I wound up switching over to choir in high school because our band director he scared the crap out of me. So, and then the bastard did tank at a concert, and because I was president of the anime club, so I wasn't that good at hiding how big of a nerd I was. Because I was president of the anime club, he had me come out and do the words for it at the very beginning. That, all right, everybody, I think it's time to get this stuff together, that whole thing. And so I got to be part of that concert, but like I made the switch to choir. And so going into college, I stayed with choir, and I wound up going to a school that has like a really famous jazz festival. Cal State Bakersfield's jazz festival is not that fast, kind of more bebop jazz that I like. You know, every now and again you'll get some, but like it wasn't, I don't know, it scratched the itch, but I realized as I got older,
it's very mellow from the show I went to.
Oh yeah, some years it's mellow, some years it's a little bit more exciting, but it's not like smooth jazz.
No,
you know, it's not that stuff that you listen to while you're getting your root canal, but it's
on the elevator.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's not Muzak, but it's definitely and I have a weird love of Muzak also, but that's just because I like, you know, bachelor pad music. But there's definitely that kind of bebop, more swinging, faster, harsh sounds. We're trying to honk our saxophones and not just trying to like smoothly play them out. I remember I had a lesson with Paul Perez, who played with Tower of Power. Nice. And he was like, let me guess, whoever taught you how to play saxophone played clarinet. And I was like, she played flute. And he's like, oh God, even worse. Okay. We have to fix this. Like you're squeezing this thing like it's this classy little instrument, and it's not meant to be that. And he really kind of pushed that home. And I feel like all of that love of, to make a long story short, all that love of this sort of sound stems from how much I loved Cowboy Bebop, how much I loved the music that was coming out, you know, in high school that I was listening to. Not necessarily just like, oh, it has saxophone, but like, oh, this is connected to a very real, very important part of my childhood, if you will, my adolescence.
Which at the time in high school, like your musical influence and taste is still being heavily like formed.
Yeah. Well, and there was a video I saw the other day that was talking about there being actual like scientific evidence that the music you listen to as a teenager is the music, like will inform the music for like the rest of your life, more so than the music you listen to as a child or in your 20s. Yeah. But like specifically during that time, whatever you're listening to really does have a lot of power over what you'll gravitate towards for the rest of your life. It's a good thing I listened to everything on shuffle and was a digital hoarder so that I can not hate anything.
Yeah, right.
No, I believe that fully.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be surprised to fall at all for how many people got into that harder side of rock because of the American Dragon Ball Z theme songs.
Yeah,
for sure.
Hell, they had Dream Theater on, I think it was the Trunks special. Funimation got a couple of Dream Theater songs, which was like kind of niche prog metal stuff, but like still very heavy double bass, crazy good guitar solos, and then good keyboard solos as well. And yeah, good stuff. Yeah, that rabbit hole. If it happens on YouTube or if it happens over the course of years of your life, shoot. And it not even because while we were growing up, YouTube was just being a thing, and not even YouTube. Like YouTube didn't come out until we were in college. So there would be those like anime music videos. Oh, AMVs. Oh my God.
They still make those. They still make
those. Those are still happening.
Yeah. But like the OGs, like they had like the Korn.
I had so many Linkin burned Park DVDs. Ones. It was all Linkin Park. Linkin Park was in every one of those DVDs at some point or another.
Which is cool because all those guys are nerds, and like Mike Shinoda's a great artist, and he, animated a few music videos. There are definitely songs that I have never heard anywhere else but anime music videos that I still have in my shuffle to this day. Like there's still,
I say in my shuffle, I mean like in the rotation of music, not in my iPod shuffle.
Yeah.
I do not have an iPod shuffle at this point in my life, but there's definitely like a lot of music discovery that happened through AMVs. And sometimes it was like, this is the song. I like this particular song. I don't know anything else this person sings. And then other times it was like, I now own 3 CDs because I discovered this one particular artist that I still have never heard anywhere else but that one AMV.
Classics.
All right. Well, this has been great. I know we've kind of bounced all over the place and it's been really organic, but I really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed it, man. It was it's always fun to like just nerd out about this stuff. You just don't get to do it often in the day to day.
Right. Yeah. That's why we have this podcast that we do, because that's what we like to do all the time.
It's a good way to do it. It's a good way to set up your life.
Right?
Yeah. Just dedicate a room in your house to talking about nerd stuff.
While surrounded by a bunch of nerds.
There are worse things to dedicate a room to.
Right?
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, Marcus. Dr. Marcus Norris, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about this kind of cultural interchange that happens between Black culture in America and Japan. I would love to do this again and talk specifically about Kung Fu and funk. But that is a whole nother podcast. Thank you so much. Tell the people where they can find you.
So my website is just my name, marcusnorris.com. I am at Marcus Norris on Instagram.
Wonderful. And where can we listen to your music?
If you just go to Spotify, Apple Music, any of these, you can search my name, Marcus Norris, and you can search South Side Symphony, 3 words.
Very cool. Is there anything coming up that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, actually, next month, I don't know when this comes out, but July 19th, I recently scored my first television series.
Oh, what?
And and it's super the music is super anime influenced. I try to sneak it into everything I can.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So there's a new series coming out called Lady in the Lake on Apple TV.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've heard of that.
It stars Natalie Portman. It's this like mystery, dark thing, but they're also releasing the soundtrack on the same day as July 19th, and it'll be out under my name and South Side Symphony. It's called Lady in the Lake.
Wonderful. Great. Congratulations, man.
Thanks. I'm really excited about it.
Definitely check that out.
Well, thank you so much for being on here. You are free to go.
All right, guys. This was a lot of fun. Let's do it again sometime.
All right. Well, that's it for us. Thank you so much, Marcus, for being on here. For everybody who's wanting to find us on the internet, we are Sneaky Geek Podcast. You can find us at Sneaky Geek Podcast. You can also find our website, sneakygeekpodcast.com, which is pretty cool. We got one of those now. You should look that up. And find us on Threads, find us on Instagram. And if you try to find us anywhere else, you're probably not going to get much information from us. But we're very active on Threads, so be sure to check us out over there.
If you find us anywhere else, let us know.
Yeah. And if you find us in the wild, come give us a crisp high five. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and then of course you can find Brian and I individually on Instagram if you know. And if you don't know, listen to another episode and find out there. Haha.
Yeah.
Sneaky Geek is hosted by Bryce Rankins and Brian Romero. This episode was edited by Bryce Rankins. Our logo and website were designed by Ali Nimmons. Our theme song was written and produced by Skylar Johnson. Copyright 2024, Sneaky Geek Media, all rights reserved.